Thank you very much, Desmond. Thank you very much, everyone. Grateful for your time and for those watching online as well. So a few things I'm going to go through today. Just briefly talk a bit about ourselves. Just give you a bit of context because you may or may not have heard of NTT before. What we're doing in terms of our innovation and our approach, which I'll touch on as well. But really, there's 6 things that I plan to talk about today. Number 1 is, who are we? As I mentioned, you might not know our company, why we're in Hong Kong, and why we've invested in Hong Kong. What are we investing in as a business? When we talk about AI and we talk about the future, what kind of areas are we investing in? Why are we investing? And why is, as a Japanese company, Hong Kong particularly interesting for us? Why have we set up an innovation lab in Hong Kong? Where are we investing? What kind of technologies are we investing into? Where do we see as the future? Areas like quantum computing, for example, and what are some of the areas that we're investing in those areas? And then finally, I think something very relevant to those of you in the room and those of you online is, why are we also working with startups? Why are we collaborating? Why aren't we just trying to do it all ourselves? And how do we as a business start to think like a startup? How can we learn from the community here around the innovations that we're putting into place as well? So with that, just a very quick background around who we are. So NTT, Nippon Telephone Telegraph Company, we have about 300,000 people around the world, so quite a large Japanese conglomerate. And as a Japanese conglomerate, we have many different business units. The area that you might be most familiar with is Docomo. If you've ever been to Japan and bought a SIM card, when you've gone skiing in Niseko, for example, Docomo is the mobile part of the business. So in Hong Kong, our NTT group, NTT Com Asia, comes under Docomo business, where we focus on the enterprise aspects of the business, so not the business to consumer, but business to business. We focus on large enterprise businesses, like financial services and large commercial clients. Essentially, what we focus on as a business, a few different areas. Core to a lot of what we do is around sustainability and ESG. So going to net zero, for example, 2040, we have some very ambitious goals around 2030 as well, around our scope 1, scope 2. So we have a lot of focus around sustainability, ESG as a business. AI and data, this is really core to a lot of what we're doing now. A lot of our focus, our investment is around AI and infrastructure that enables and supports AI. Edge and IoT, the devices that then support that. As I mentioned, we come from the background of Docomo in Japan, so we put a lot of focus and investment into mobile technology, and then smart city and automation as well. In terms of our business, a couple of very quick numbers. So we've been around for about 150 years, so a very long establishment. We set up the very first telegraph connection between Tokyo and Yokohama about 150 years ago. So really a lot of rich legacy. But the other number I'll very quickly mention, our R&D investment annually is about $3.6 billion US. Most of that has gone into the technology that I'll talk about in a moment, which is really the precursor to the next generation of AI and quantum computing. So we're putting a lot of investment into the infrastructure to be able to support AI and quantum computing. So a lot of our global investments going into that. But that represents about 3 to 4% of our annual revenue. So a lot of our revenue goes back into R&D within the business. And then in terms of Docomo Ventures, this is the area of the business where we focus particularly around startups. So we have 3 corporate ventures, 2 in the US, 1 in Silicon Valley, 1 with a partnership with Harvard, and 1 in Japan. And we have a number of innovation entities around the world, including 1 here in Hong Kong with our innovation labs. In Hong Kong, just to give you a quick context, we're not new to Hong Kong. We established here in 1999. Our core business in Hong Kong has been infrastructure, so it's large data centers. We've invested recently into AI data centers, so liquid cooling to be able to support AI workloads. And then more recently, last year, we obtained Hong Kong's second ever private 5G license. So the first private 5G license was acquired by the Airport Authority to cover the Hong Kong airport. We've now acquired the second private 5G license, which enables us to put private 5G anywhere in Hong Kong. So something that's not well known, I think many of you who use mobile phones probably know the consumer carriers like SmarTone, CSL, etc. But we've invested in this for enterprise use as well. In terms of our business, very quickly, I mentioned the infrastructure. So we have 3 data centers in Hong Kong, 2 in Chung Kwan O, one in Tai Po. So this is really the core infrastructure of our business. We have about 400 people in Hong Kong, predominantly supporting the data center business, but also in sales, in research development, etc. And this is a quick snapshot of our data centers in Hong Kong. So this is where we're based in Chuk Mah On. So we've got 2 large data centers with an office building in the middle. In terms of the infrastructure investment, so when I talk about infrastructure, there's 2 points. One is our traditional historic infrastructure. So we have one of the large cable landing stations, submarine cable landing stations in Hong Kong that comes into our data center. It's the Asia Submarine Cable Express that connects Japan, Hong Kong, Southeast Asia, and the Philippines. One very quick fact about this, those of you who use the internet in Hong Kong, about 80% of the internet traffic coming into Hong Kong goes through our data center, through these submarine cables. So we're very proud that the infrastructure that we've invested in over the last 15 years carries a very substantial amount of importance for the infrastructure in Hong Kong. So today we're powering about 80% of the internet. But when I talk about investing in the future, the area that $3.6 million that I talked about that we're investing in, and actually we brought to Hong Kong very recently, is something that is very interesting for our business, and I'll touch on why this is important from an innovation perspective. Something called all-photonic networks. And this is part of a global investment that we're doing around something called innovative optical and wireless networks. And essentially what this is we're moving away from electronics in our core infrastructure and core network and moving towards photonics. So using light to be able to support and power a lot of the core network components that powers our infrastructure. And for those of you who have been involved in some way in quantum computing or have heard of quantum computing, there's some debate about how far out we are from seeing quantum computing in reality. Some argue maybe 10 years, maybe 20 years, maybe even sooner. But the reality is that with both quantum computing and with AI, the infrastructure is going to have to adapt and change to be able to meet those kind of workloads and requirements. And a huge part of doing that is moving away from electronics in our infrastructure, using electronics to power infrastructure, and moving towards light, moving towards photons and photonics. And so we're putting a lot of investment, and we've just invested in Hong Kong. We've launched this a few weeks ago. We have a very large launch event that's happening in January around the photonic network. So essentially, apart from just using fiber optics to connect the different parts together, we will use optical technology within our actual equipment in the data center and the network to be able to power a lot of different kinds of applications. So this is going to be really exciting for the future of AI. And for financial services, things like low latency trading, etc., there's going to be a lot of applications for these kind of technologies. So really thrilled that we've invested in this in Japan, and we brought this kind of technology to Hong Kong. So a large part of our investment is also bringing that to Hong Kong. So I guess I want to give you that context just to give you a bit of illustration around what our business is, a bit of our background, what we invested in terms of R&D and innovation. But I think the big question that many people ask is, as a Japanese company, why are we investing in Hong Kong? We have many different markets we can invest in around the world. Indeed, we are investing in the US, Europe, we're investing into China, and Southeast Asia. But why Hong Kong in particular? I think one thing which really stands out about Hong Kong is the vision that the government has in terms of its budget, in terms of where it sees the future of Hong Kong. That's one of the reasons that we and many other enterprises are starting to look at Hong Kong with increased interest for innovation funding. So if we look at what the government has put forward in their last few budgets, 25-26, they've put forward $1 billion Hong Kong dollars to establish the Artificial Intelligence Research Development Center. They have the International Conference to embody AI robots, International Young Scientists Forum. They've set out a smart city blueprint for Hong Kong with a number of initiatives. But particularly around the broader IoT landscape, the government has invested or will invest around 150 billion Hong Kong dollars into various IoT developments. And more recently, we've seen with the critical infrastructure bill, there's a huge amount of focus as well on the development and support for critical infrastructure and cybersecurity around critical infrastructure. So from our perspective, when we look at markets that we want to invest in, and our business wants to invest in, we want to look at a market where we're not just going to be investing ourselves as an enterprise, but we're going to have very strong government support around growth and investment into innovation in the business. And Hong Kong is one of those regions. We see that the government is quite serious about their investment in terms of innovation, in terms of research and development. And they're not just talking about it, they're putting their money where their mouth is. They're investing in new research and development areas. They're obviously investing in the Northern Metropolis, the Samson Technopole. And with a lot of these investments that the government is putting in infrastructure, in people, in technology, we're really thrilled as a company to be able to support that and come behind that as well, putting our own investment into the market. And that's why we're putting very substantial R&D and innovation investment into Hong Kong. So what areas are we investing in? If we look at our traditional business, as I mentioned, our traditional business is very much around data centers, networks, infrastructure. But as we look at the broader sort of smart city, we see Hong Kong as really one of the key regions that's developing into a smart city that needs these kind of infrastructure and applications. We're moving very much beyond the infrastructure into areas like AI, wireless, as I mentioned, private 5G, and smart building infrastructure and management. The reason that this is important is because when we look at collaboration, we look at startups, we look at universities, we look at different R&D centers like the Logistics Supply Chain Multi-Tech R&D Center, LSCM, the different groups that we can collaborate with, that collaboration really moves beyond our traditional core infrastructure in terms of the data center and networks and into other areas that we see as huge growth engines for this market for Hong Kong, so AI, wireless, and smart cities, smart buildings. So just to make that a little bit more tangible in terms of what we're investing in and we're developing, and I'll tie this back to some of the points around innovation later on. As I mentioned, our core foundation historically has always been around data center and network. So the core infrastructure that powers things like the internet in Hong Kong. And I mentioned that stat for those who've just come in the room. We run about 80% of Hong Kong's internet traffic through our infrastructure. So that's always been the core of the business that we have. But as we sort of expand out and as we're investing more into the market, the areas that we see particularly interesting are, number one is AI. And the infrastructure that supports AI. So the reality is, with more and more AI being used by universities, by research and development labs, we're seeing more and more corporate application of AI as well. So in fintech, for example, insurtech, proptech, there's a lot of applications of AI. The reality is that the infrastructure, the traditional infrastructure, will have to transform to be able to support that. And that's where we're investing very heavily into high-performance computing. So you may have heard of the Science Park and Cyberport Supercomputing Center. We are collaborating with them and also building our own high-performance computing zone within our infrastructure that uses very modern technology like liquid cooling, for example, to be able to cool the GPU chipsets. So a lot of investment has gone into this area. In wireless in particular, private 5G, a very new technology to hit the market, but in an area that we see has a lot of promise, especially around areas like construction, smart campus, a lot of these large areas that need very highly reliable, low latency, highly secure connectivity. So this is an area that's particularly interesting. Hospitals as well. So for those that are doing technology around hospitals, robotics, a lot of that is going to ride in future over this private 5G network as a precursor to 6G. And then finally, smart technology. And this is where we're investing in new technologies that we've built ourselves, for example, and that we're collaborating with startups on that I'll talk about in a moment, around smart buildings and smart cities. So as our city continues to develop and grow, as our population continues to develop and grow, we're looking at ways that we can improve the life and the health and the safety of people living in the city. So whether that's looking at people that are in office buildings and residential, looking at workers in construction sites, looking at the silver economy, people as they start to age, looking at how we can support that in different areas. We're putting quite a lot of investment into those smart city technologies as well. And then of course agentic and edge AI, which is a huge topic and focus in the industry. But the reality is, as much as we have the budget, as much as we have $3.6 billion of annual R&D spend, as much as we have a team of engineers and researchers in Japan and Hong Kong, the reality is that not only can't we won't go on this journey alone. And so for us, what's really important when we think about innovation as corporate is we can't just do innovation within our own bubble, within ourselves. We have to really work with the ecosystem to be able to bring the ideas from the startups, from the R&D, from the universities, from the professors, together to be able to solve a lot of problems for society. What we can bring to the table is we've invested billions of dollars into infrastructure. We've invested billions into our data centers, into things like the photonic computing, into private 5G, into many of these large infrastructure investments that smaller businesses or individuals or startups just wouldn't be able to invest in. So we put a lot of that infrastructure in place. But what we really need is those new, fresh ideas, the creativity that comes from the professors, from the students, from the innovative startups, to be able to support that and create new kinds of use cases. And I'll talk about that in a moment in terms of some of the businesses we've worked with in the past. But for us, we really see this all coming together. The infrastructure that we've invested in, our Japanese and global R&D capabilities, our partners in Hong Kong, but very importantly, our Innovation Alliance. Yoshida-san is here from our Innovation Alliance as well. So for those who are interested, for those who want to know a little bit more about how we're collaborating with startups, universities, professors in Hong Kong, then feel free to speak to him afterwards as well. But this we established in March last year, and really the purpose of that was to find some of the best ideas in the market and be able to collaborate with some of those businesses, leveraging our infrastructure, leveraging our investment to be able to support some of the biggest challenges that we see. And we've done quite a lot in the last year. We have participated in the Poly University Startup Challenge, the Global Startup Challenge. We have worked with a number of universities on various collaboration projects. We've worked with a number of startups and collaboration projects just in the last year and a half. So very excited to talk to people here as well, just to see what kind of new ideas people are working on, and to see where, as an industry, we can support you as well. So all of that, as I mentioned, we can't go on this journey alone. We won't go on this journey alone. We really want to collaborate when we create new kinds of innovation. And this isn't just NTT. I think a lot of corporations now will start to see more and more investment. Other Japanese companies like Ricoh, for example, they established their AI center in Cyberport. They're working very closely with startups in Cyberport. So we're seeing more and more of these corporates, like ourselves, like other corporates, that are wanting to collaborate and work with startups. And the reason behind that, as I mentioned, is we have the infrastructure, we have the R&D, we have the spend, but really what we can't develop and what you have that's very unique is those innovative ideas, it's the patents, it's the creativity that you bring that as a corporate we just don't have internally. And so as I mentioned, we set up last year this Innovation Alliance, and really the intention behind it was to be this collaborative ecosystem to enable new technology breakthroughs. New technology breakthroughs don't come from any one person, any one business. That's a strong belief that we have. It comes from collaboration. Even this, going back to this technology that I talked about, this innovative optical and wireless network, this all-photonic network, that is the result of a collaboration with over 150 different businesses. So we are the head of the consortium, NTT is the head of the consortium of businesses that is coming out with this new technology. But this technology we're partnering with companies like Intel around the chips, for example. We're partnering with NEC around a lot of the core systems and core functions within the networking equipment. So the reality is, as a business, we can't do this ourselves. And to be able to see technology breakthroughs, it's very important that we collaborate with this ecosystem. So we set up this ecosystem about a year and a half ago around a few key areas, so mobile, edge, IoT, and the idea was to co-develop, co-create, do some joint development around new areas that can benefit Hong Kong society. And we're very privileged that we've been able to partner with a number of organizations, including CUHK, but also Science Park, LSCM, ASTRI, who focuses on very deep fundamental research around AI, CityU, and a number of other universities as well that we've been very actively collaborating with. Really our goal is a few things, and particularly with CUHK, looking to find new opportunities for collaboration with startups, finding opportunities to co-develop new innovative solutions, particularly within the smart city context, introducing labs for collaboration. So we're working with quite a few different labs. With HKUST, for example, we're working with one of their labs, one of their corporate venture labs, to develop something for the market. And then also working with various universities. So for example, with CityU, we are part of the EE Joint Lab. We've become a named partner with that lab in October last year. And as I mentioned earlier as well, with the PolyU International Future Challenge. So I'm hoping that this will be the first of hopefully many more sessions of discussion and collaboration as well with CUHK. And I think just speaking to Desmond and the rest of the team at the KTO, we see a lot of potential with the university in terms of what we're doing, what we're investing in with robotics, etc., for collaboration with industry. Just to give you a bit of a sense of what we're doing with some other universities, for example, so with City University, we have partnered, as I mentioned, we acquired last year this private 5G license. One of the interesting applications for private 5G is around robotics, but very specifically around autonomous vehicles, and a concept that's called V2X, so vehicle to vehicle, vehicle to person, vehicle to mobile, vehicle to everything. This concept of V2X, which is a very fundamental concept around autonomous vehicles, especially in Hong Kong, where the reality is that the roads are very difficult to navigate for an autonomous vehicle. The many one-way roads we have, the many hills we have, the many obstructions, makes it very difficult to implement technology like autonomous vehicles into Hong Kong. We've seen one of those applications in San Francisco, for example, in mainland China. About a month and a half ago, I was in Tianhai, and I rode on the Pony AI self-driving car. So quite an amazing experience. But you can see a very big difference between Tianhai and Hong Kong. Tianhai has very wide open roads, lots of space, very well structured, very few obstacles. So for an AI vehicle, an autonomous vehicle, it's very easy to navigate those roads. If you drive in Hong Kong, there's a lot of obstructions, a lot of roads, a lot of people. And so to be able to get to level 3, level 4 autonomous vehicles in Hong Kong is going to require a lot more work, R&D, support from the universities. And so we're working with CityU for a project for the Transport Department to be able to test new innovative machine learning technologies around V2X. And because we have invested in this private 5G technology, we're able to set up basically a private 5G network just for the autonomous vehicles. So there's no interference with Wi-Fi, for example, with public 5G networks. It's a completely self-contained network. For those who know a little bit about mobile technology, on a much higher spectrum, so it's a millimeter wave spectrum, a much higher spectrum compared to our public mobile phones and compared to Wi-Fi. And so for something like autonomous vehicles, that's a very interesting application. So for those who are looking at deep tech or deep tech applications, machine learning, computer vision, etc., a lot of very exciting applications that we can look at there. I'm very keen to explore any areas that we can collaborate on in that area. Through that, we have set up our lab in Hong Kong as well. So part of our investment into R&D in Hong Kong is we've set up what we call a cross lab. And really the idea is to bring together the innovation and the application, which is why we call it the cross lab, where we work with a number of our Innovation Alliance partners to host things like workshops, trainings, proof of concepts, new ideas, leveraging things like the private 5G mobile networks, edge computing and AI. So we have quite a lot of investment that we've put into edge computing as well, and also Internet of Things, IoT. So very welcome for the students, professors, others here to come and visit our lab. You're very welcome to come out to Chung Kwan O. We'll book you into a spot as well, and we can showcase some of the technologies that we have, including some of the startups that we work with. We showcase their technologies there as well. And every time we have corporates coming through, we have a lot of corporate clients, we showcase our startup technology, not just the NTT core technology as well. One of the examples of the startups that we're working with is a company called Carta-X. It was founded in Hong Kong. It's a member of the Science Park, so it's one of the incubators from the Hong Kong Science and Technology Parks. They are particularly focused around AI cameras and AI for construction. So one of the challenges, as many of you may know, in construction is the health and safety of the workers. And there have been a number of high-profile incidents in construction in recent years. And so there's a lot of emphasis and focus. So the Hong Kong government has invested 2.2 billion Hong Kong dollars into the fund to be able to support construction safety, to support what's called the 4S, the Smart Site Safety System in construction. So the government is recognizing the challenges of working in the construction environment and the importance of investing into technology in construction. So there's a lot of very interesting startups that are coming out around construction technology. The reality is working in the field in construction is very difficult. Getting access to good connectivity is very difficult. Wi-Fi doesn't work very well outdoors on construction sites. Public mobile doesn't work very well, especially for remote sites, and because there's a lot of congestion as soon as the workers start to go on. And so we collaborated with them, leveraging our private 5G network and their AI cameras to come up with a new technology for AI for construction. So we did a field test at one of the CEDB. So CEDB is one of the Hong Kong government construction departments that focuses on outdoor sites, so particularly hillside, for example, landfill, etc. So we collaborated with Cortex, with the CED department to set up one of their AI cameras using private 5G in the site. So that was done successfully. And we actually have some coverage of that as well in Hoi TV. So those of you who watch Hoi TV, cable TV, there's an episode that should be coming out, I think, soon, which talks a little bit about what we're doing at the construction site. And particularly, as I mentioned, to support video. So for many of the applications around video, robotics, etc., we really try and invest and use our infrastructure to be able to support the startups doing those kinds of technologies. A few other things that we have been doing in Hong Kong, just to be able to support that innovation over the last year. So I mentioned we launched our Innovation Alliance program in March last year. We held our first ever Innovation Summit in Hong Kong in October 2024. So we've held many of these summits around the world. We've held many of these kind of summits in Japan. This was our first time holding it in Hong Kong. For those of you who may know Sophia, the humanoid robot, she was built in Hong Kong by Hanson Robotics. So this is a Hong Kong developed startup that was developing humanoid robots and using AI machine learning, so effectively using LLMs about 10 years before LLMs were created for conversational interaction. So she's been around since 2013, a really forward-looking technology in Hong Kong. So she was part of the Innovation Summit. And then we had in June this year one of our Tech Talk salons. So we had our Japanese NTT Group company came out to Hong Kong to work with a number of startups, a number of organizations to try and continue to develop the innovation alliance within Hong Kong, but also connected with Southeast Asia. So one of the things that we're seeing is there's a huge, vibrant startup ecosystem in Southeast Asia, especially in places like Indonesia. There's a lot of startup activity that's happening. The Science Park is investing quite heavily into reaching out into other markets as well. And the Science Park has recently been going out to Indonesia to try and bridge closer ties with Indonesia. So we've been working with them in that to bring the startup ecosystems of Southeast Asia and Hong Kong closer together. So those of you who are developing a startup in Hong Kong, I would strongly encourage you look at other ecosystems as well. Look at where you can travel through the Science Park or through other organizations to Singapore, but also to other parts of Southeast Asia. So especially Indonesia is a very vibrant startup ecosystem. Thailand, Malaysia, there's a lot that's happening around startup ecosystems there as well. Japan as well. So we have been working with the Science Park on Japan, bridging ties closer between Hong Kong and Japan. We had 2 weeks ago the first ever Hong Kong-Japan Innovation Summit that was held at the Hong Kong Science Park. So we had a Japan Consul General. We had a number of large Japanese companies, including NTT, that participated in that to see how we can bridge closer ties between Hong Kong and Japan. So Japan's quite an interesting market in that it's very mature, very large market. So for those of you who are looking to expand overseas, Japan is a very interesting market. It has its own unique challenges. Language is obviously a very big challenge. Culture is a big challenge. You have to learn to adapt to the Japanese market, but hopefully that's where companies like NTT can help. But something a bit closer to home, Southeast Asia is a great area for expansion. This company that I mentioned, Cortex, they're expanding now quite aggressively into Indonesia. So they have a lot of opportunities that they see in Indonesia. So really excited to be working with them, not just in Hong Kong, but also to be bridging them with the different kinds of startup ecosystems around Southeast Asia as well. And so that sort of brings me to the last topic. So we're talking about working with startups, how we collaborate with startups, where we've been investing in, how we're trying to work together with startups. But one of the big challenges that we have as a business, and this is where we really like the input from the startup community, from the innovators in the market, is apart from just working with startups, how we can think more like a startup. The way I would describe a large business like NTT is sometimes we're like a super tanker. Once we start moving in one direction, it can take a very, very long time for us to turn around and face a different direction. And so when we see market trends, when we see changes in the market, when we see areas where we need to be agile and adapt very quickly, sometimes it's a very large business that can be very difficult for us to do. And that's why we're very keen to learn from the community, learn from the startups, the innovation ecosystem, to see how we can bring aspects of that to our business. So we're able to do the very long term, very big vision, very big investments in areas like photonic networks, in areas like private 5G. We can look at this very long-term roadmap and we can move in that direction. But when we see lots of very interesting opportunities, for example, things like the 4S in Hong Kong, the Smart Site Safety System, these immediate applications of the technologies we're investing in, very often we need to think like a startup. We need to think about how we can be very agile and adapt to these new kind of market demands and market trends. And so this is where we've been trying to learn from the ecosystem, learn from the market, and apply those to adapt ourselves to think more like a startup. One of those areas that we have been trying to do that is in smart buildings and smart cities. So we launched at the start of this year a new brand that we call Ocean Intelligence, which is our smart city, smart building platform. And the idea was we saw this wave of change from the evolution from the management of buildings. So today, if we look at a building, if we look at a structure in the built environment, everyone talks about the management of buildings. How do we manage a building? How do we do property management, facility management? We want to move beyond just the management of a building to really the optimization and the sustainable value creation. So rather than seeing the building as just bricks and cement that has to be managed, that has to be maintained every time something breaks, how can you be more proactive? How can you look at the environmental impact of the building? How can you look at reducing the carbon footprint of a building? How can you look at making the building better for the tenants? The experience of a building better for tenants. When you walk into a room and the air conditioning is freezing, for example, in an office building, that air conditioning is also contributing to a greater carbon footprint. So by reducing the air conditioning, by increasing the temperature very slightly, you also reduce the carbon footprint of the building, you make it more comfortable for the tenants. There's a whole evolution within the building that we're starting to see now. Whereas in the past, it was just a very simple, okay, if something's broken, I'm going to fix it. We have an air conditioning, I'll turn it on or off. So we're starting to see this evolution into a building just going from a fixed asset into something that's smart. And to be able to address this, we want to be able to use a lot of that ecosystem, use what's out there, use our own innovative thinking, use design thinking principles to come up with new ideas of how we can actually tackle this problem in the market. Now, thinking like a startup involves thinking about the addressable market. I think many of you who are working in innovation, working in startups and entrepreneurship, you know that the first thing that any investor asks is, how big is the addressable market? How big is the TAM or the SOM? How big is that target addressable market? How big is that serviceable, obtainable market? How much of that market can you actually go after? Because if the market's only a $10 million market or a $100 million market, even if you control 50% of that market is so small that there's no interest in going after that market. So for us as a business, thinking like a startup meant we couldn't just think about the engineering and think about what cool technology we can build and invest in. We had to actually look at the market and look at the addressable market we could go after. So we said, okay, if we're going to look at this smart building market, for example, this smart city, smart building market, is there a big addressable market beyond Hong Kong that we can actually look at? And we saw, okay, it is actually a quite substantial market. If we look at AI in smart buildings, for example, and this is from a number of research reports, today it's only worth about $41 billion. But by 2034, that market's going to grow to about $360 billion US dollars. A lot of that growth is going to be driven by things like energy, smart energy optimization in buildings. So there's a lot of wastage that goes into energy use in buildings. So driving down the energy use, optimizing the energy in buildings. A lot of that is going to go into things like predictive maintenance and operations. So today, what happens is something breaks, you call the facility team calls somebody, they go up and they fix something, and it takes a few hours to fix that, or maybe they need to go get some spare parts. There's a lot of focus now in the industry in before something breaks, how can you predict that it's going to break, and how can you have somebody come and fix it before something actually breaks. Now for an air conditioning in a room like this, that's going to be less critical. But if you talk about the chiller plants in the building, or something like an uninterruptible power supply, so the equipment that keeps the power going in a hospital, for example, that kind of equipment is super critical. And so being able to maintain that equipment, and being able to do predictive maintenance and operations on that kind of critical equipment that supports critical infrastructure like hospitals, like our energy grid, for example, so we don't get blackouts or brownouts in the energy grid as the demands of the energy increases. That kind of technology is going to be really important, and that drives this growth towards that $360 billion. And then, of course, the facility management market, we talk about the management of buildings, always has been and always will be a very substantial market as well. And so when we look at this from the lens of a startup and we think about how we can be a startup, think more like a startup as a corporation, we look at that opportunity and that addressable market. And so part of addressing that market is developing these kind of new technologies that we built. So as I mentioned, we invest in building this own technology ourselves called Ocean Intelligence. Our goal for building it was really to tackle our own problem to start with. So the reason that we spun it off into a separate brand and into a separate project that we're now taking to the market is because this addressable market was so big. But the reason that we started was to address our own pain point. So our own pain point was when we looked at making our own buildings smarter, we looked at reducing the energy optimization of our buildings. And by the way, in our buildings we spend a lot of money on energy. I think we're among the top 5 energy consumers in Hong Kong because of the nature of our business, because the data center is the type of data that we consume. We're very, very heavy users of energy, consumers of energy in Hong Kong. And so as a data center business, we look at how can we use data to actually drive down the energy use that we have to improve the ESG, to improve the sustainability of our buildings. When you look at traditional building environments, you look at the assets that we have, it's very difficult to collect data from those assets, from the management systems inside the buildings. And so the problem that we had, the problem statement that we had, was that data couldn't be obtained from the devices themselves. So we had to look at the existing technology that was in the building. We had existing building management systems, you had existing building technology that were inside the buildings, but the cost of acquiring the data from those systems was very, very high. So anytime we wanted to go and get data about our own buildings that we own, from the systems that we have in the building, and we talk to all of those different companies, they say, no problem, we can give you the data, but that's going to cost you $1,000 US per connection. It's going to cost you all of this money to be able to collect the data from the systems that we have. So that was the second problem statement that we had. And the reality was that without data, we couldn't progress our digital transformation. We couldn't go on this journey of trying to reduce our energy footprint, of reducing our energy costs, of reducing or providing things like predictive maintenance. And so we started on this journey more than 10 years ago of how do we actually automate the building, how do we automate the facility access management, how do we visualize it, how do we go through analytics. And then more importantly, in the last couple of years, with LLMs, with the advent of our own models that we've produced as well as some of the partners that we've worked with as part of this tech ecosystem, how can we actually start to use a lot of that infrastructure investment we've made to drive things like predictive maintenance and AI agents. And this is where we've really worked with the innovation ecosystem in Hong Kong as well. So there's one great company I'll talk about in a second that does some fantastic work around energy optimization for buildings. And so leveraging all of the infrastructure investment we've made over the last 10 years, we've been able to partner with them to really drive down energy and electricity use within the building as well. And so we've tried to solve these 3 challenges. And again, thinking like a startup, even though we're a corporate, even though we have a very large amount of investment that we put into these technologies, we have to build these technologies to try and solve a particular addressable problem. So for us, it was the difficulty in management of data, being able to get access to the data in the built environment. It was the excessive manual operations and efficiency that we had to do within our own building. When we look at the addressable market out there today, this is a big reality. If you talk to any facility management organization, including the facility management team that probably runs this university, the reality is there's a lot of manual work. Something breaks, somebody calls somebody else, somebody writes it out on a piece of paper, somebody takes a picture, sends that picture to somebody else, prints it out, puts it on a piece of paper, and then sticks it in a box somewhere. There's a lot of manual work that goes into running a large facility today. And the costs are only going up. The energy, electricity costs are going up, the operational costs are going up, the people costs are going up. It's becoming more and more expensive to find talent, to find people. So when we think about, okay, we're investing in this new technology, we're putting money into this new thing that we're bringing out to the market, are we actually addressing some real problems in the market? And is there a real cost element to those problems that we're addressing that can help to either increase the revenue for our customers or reduce the cost? So in this case, we're looking at how can we help ourselves and our customers reduce the cost of things like the people operations, the energy use, etc. And so we set up this system to basically do these 3 things. One is collect the data from the building, from many of the systems within the building. Don't worry about the terms, but basically these are the core systems within the building. The second is to manage the facility. So actually doing the full facility lifecycle management. So from when something breaks, or even before something breaks, to fixing the problem, to bringing third-party vendors into the building, contractors into the building to fix the problem, and then finally taking action using AI through things like energy management, predictive maintenance to be able to solve that problem. So this is the technology, this is what we have built, but as I go back to the reason that we built it, number one was to address our own problem, but number two was because we saw a very large addressable market that we could go after. And so for us, some of the benefits that we were able to derive from doing that, number one was when we look at a conventional management system, management systems are complicated. They're monitoring lots of different things, lots of different systems, lots of different types of equipment. One commercial building, for example, could have 15 different systems that they're looking at, from the heating, ventilation, to the security, to the tenant management. All of these different systems that a building is managing. How do we actually bring that into a single view, into a single portal, into a single dashboard that people can actually proactively use? And how can we do that by bringing much more data at a substantially lower cost? And that was the answer that we had to the problem statement that we had identified and addressed. So this is one of the areas where, even as a large business, we really have to think like a startup, think about what is the actual market problem that we came across, and how do we try and address that problem. So things like work management, I mentioned that one of the challenges that facility management is highly manual today, very, very manual workload. So how do we actually reduce a lot of those tasks? How do we reduce the 4,000 very manual tasks that we have in building today to just 2,000? So these are some of the things that we've actually implemented. And then finally using AI to optimize the energy use of a building. So using things like AI agents, predictive maintenance, energy optimization to substantially reduce the power consumption within a building as well. So we've been very lucky that in going on this journey of trying to think like a startup, of innovating, of trying to bring these fresh ideas into the business, we've been recognized by some of the industry. So through the PropTech Association of Hong Kong, for example, for trying to develop and push along the smart city agenda within Hong Kong, we were recognized for one of their awards, as well as the Communications Authority of Hong Kong. So I think just a bit of recognition from the industry around what we're trying to do to try and push that forward. But as I mentioned, we can't just go on this journey alone, so it's not just us that's doing this by ourselves. We are really working with this partner ecosystem. So we look at this technology, this sort of platform that we have developed, from the connectivity to the management and the AI. The reality is that for this to be successful, for this to really work, for us to be successful in this domain, we have to work very closely with a partner ecosystem. And that could be part of the innovation alliance, so the startups, for example, the universities, the professors that we're working with, and we're working around a lot of very innovative technologies in this area, but also the domain expertise. We have some very good experts within the company, we have some very smart PhDs within the company, but the reality is we don't have all of the expertise. So that's where we try to work with real domain experts in different areas, like energy management, for example. So we work with some really smart people around energy management, energy optimization, equipment manufacturers. So there's a lot of equipment that goes into a building, into a smart city. And so we try to work with a lot of those equipment manufacturers as well. And this is one of the examples that I mentioned of the partner ecosystem of one of the startups that we're working with. So this is a company called Carnot Innovations. I mentioned Cartex, who are part of the Hong Kong Science Park. Carnot Innovations were also a company that are part of the Hong Kong Science Park. They've now graduated from the incubation program, so they've gone through the whole incubation program at the Science Park. They've moved beyond the incubation program. They've done very well. They have some fantastic investment in Hong Kong from some very large investors. They've expanded to Southeast Asia. They've set up an office there. They're expanding to Japan. Recently, they've started expanding to the Middle East and the US as well. So really proud that we could be part of that journey with them. So we worked with them about a year ago to bring them into our data center. So one of the problem statements that they had is they had done some great commercial building work in Hong Kong. So they worked with some commercial real estate to bring down their energy costs. In fact, they've even worked with some very large clients in Hong Kong, like the airport, like the train system, for example. So they've done some really fantastic work in commercial contexts, but they've never worked in critical facilities, areas like data centers, hospitals, etc. And the reality is that when you're operating in a critical building, it's very different from when you're operating in a commercial building. And so we brought them in about a year ago, just to do some collaboration with our own facility. So we collaborated with them to develop something new for our facility, and now we're helping them take that out to the market as well, to all of the other markets that they're looking to expand into, like Japan, Southeast Asia, the Middle East, the US, etc. So through that collaboration, we've been able to bring down our own energy costs. So I mentioned, we're a substantial consumer of energy in Hong Kong. We're among the top 5 users of energy in Hong Kong. And when you think of all the properties out there, that's very substantial because of the nature of our business, because we're a data center, because we're heavy consumer of technology. So we're able to use them to see quite a substantial improvement in the energy usage within our facility. And so for us, really to tie all of this together, there's a few key parts. Number one, as a business, we're investing very heavily into Hong Kong. We see Hong Kong as a very key strategic market for our business, partly because of the investment that the Hong Kong government is putting into driving the IT sector, driving R&D around different segments. So we're continuing to invest very heavily into Hong Kong. We're looking to leverage our position as a global business to bring together the different incubation ecosystems, innovation ecosystems around the world, like Japan, Hong Kong, Southeast Asia. So we're looking to link a lot of that together. We're trying to collaborate as much as possible with universities, with startups, with partners in the innovation ecosystem within Hong Kong. And then as a business, as I mentioned, we can be, as a 300,000 person business, sometimes we're a lot like a super tanker. Once we start moving in one direction, it can be very difficult to change directions. And so that's what we're trying to learn from the ecosystem. Think like a startup and adapt what we're learning from the startups, the way that startups do things, into our own thinking and our own approach to the market, including, when we're trying to build a new product, we don't just look at engineering something, coming up with something interesting or new or cool or great from an engineering perspective, but how do we actually look at what the market needs, what are the demands of the market, what's the addressable market we can go after, and then once we've identified that addressable market, building a business case to take that new technology to market. And so for us, this problem-solving approach that we take, we look at some of the real-world societal challenges, so things like environmental, reducing the environmental footprint of the physical or the built environment, especially in a place like Hong Kong, where we just consume so much energy to power our buildings, our facilities. How do we solve those real-world societal challenges? And then how do we co-create that new value? How do we collaborate with the ecosystem to co-create that new value? And so for us, really that's addressing these real-world challenges, not just building technology for technology's sake, but collaborating with the ecosystem to address those real-world challenges. And then also co-creating that value through the ecosystem. So not just trying to create value by ourselves, using our own funding, our own R&D, but how do we actually work with some of the best minds in the industry? How do we work with some of the new, fresh ideas that come from the ecosystem to be able to build something together? And so with that, I'll just pause there. I'm just happy to take any questions. And as I mentioned, Yoshida-san is here as well from our Innovation Alliance. So if there's any interest in visiting our lab, in finding out more about our Innovation Alliance, what we're doing in Hong Kong, then we'd be thrilled to talk about that as well. Thank you.